They have locked her in the North Tower, your grace, and they mean to send her to the madhouse before the month is out." The words hung in the cold study of Grimshaw Castle. Sebastian Thorne, Duke of Grimshaw, set down his glass very slowly and looked at the old man who had spoken. Roland had been the steward at the neighboring estate of Wexcombe for 40 years, and he was not a man given to drama. He stood twisting his hat in his gnarled hands, tears standing in his rheumy eyes. Sebastian, who trusted almost no one, trusted Roland. "Say that again," the Duke said slowly, "and leave nothing out." Across 3 counties, he was known as the feared Duke of Grimshaw, a title he had earned without trying and had never bothered to disown. He was a great, scarred creature of a man, dark and silent. A former soldier and a hard master now, he kept to his cold northern castle above the sea and let the world believe whatever it pleased, that he was savage, that he had killed men with his bare hands, that his heart had turned to stone in some foreign war. Some of it was even true. He had gone to war a hopeful young man and returned 4 years later, carrying a scar down the left side of his jaw and a silence he could not seem to break. He had buried himself at Grimshaw and let the legend grow around him like ivy over a ruin, because a feared man is a left-alone man, and for a long time, being left alone had seemed like the most he could hope for from life. But he was not a monster. That was the one thing the county never cared to learn. Beneath the scar, the silence, and the terrible stillness, Sebastian Thorne lived by a single governing article of faith, one forged in a war where he had seen the strong grind the weak into the mud, that a man's true worth is measured by what he does for those who cannot defend themselves. He had never once been able to stand by while the powerful crushed the powerless. It was the only thing that could draw him out of his cold tower and into the world with a fire inside him. And Roland of Wexcombe had come this bitter January night to tell him a story precisely calculated, though the old man did not know it, to bring the feared Duke down like a thunderbolt. "It's Miss Isolde, your grace," Roland said. "Miss Isolde of Wexcombe, old Sir Henry's daughter. You'll not have known her. She was but a girl when you went to the wars, but she's a woman grown now, near 24, and there was never a sweeter soul born. I'd swear it on my life, I who dandled her on my knee." His voice shook. Sir Henry died 18 months past, and left everything, the whole Wexcombe estate, to Miss Isolde, for she was his only child by his first wife, God rest her. But he'd married again late, a hard, cold beauty from London, Lady Vane, and got no more children by her, and when he died, she was left with nothing but a widow's portion and a hatred of the girl who had it all. And, your grace, the old man's hands twisted his hat near to ruin. She's been at her work ever since. Clever, poisoning the girl's name a drop at a time. Sebastian had gone very still in the way that had frightened braver men than Roland. Go on. First, it was whispers, that Miss Isolde was nervous, not quite herself since her father died, given to strange fancies. The stepmother would say it soft and sorrowful to every caller, shaking her head, so kind, so grieved. Then she turned off all the old servants who had known the girl her whole life and would have spoken for her. Turned us all off, your grace, one by one on invented faults, till there was none left in that house but the stepmother's own London people, who'd swear the moon was made of cheese if she paid them. Roland's voice broke. And then, a fortnight ago, she called in 2 physicians, her physicians, bought and paid for, and they examined Miss Isolde, a frightened girl of 24, alone, with no friend left in the world to stand by her, and they wrote it down on a paper with a seal on it, that she is of unsound mind, a danger to herself, and must be confined. They have locked her in the North Tower of her own house, the house that is hers by her own father's will, and the stepmother has the keys, and the stepmother has the estate to manage in trust now that the girl is declared mad. In 3 weeks, a carriage comes from a private madhouse near York to take Miss Isolde away, and once she's inside those walls, your grace, she is lost. No one comes out of such a place. No one is believed after. The stepmother will have it all, and the girl will rot, and there is not one soul in the county with the power to stop it, save one. He looked up at the feared Duke of Grimshaw and made his last desperate throw. I came to you, your grace, because they say you fear nothing and no one, and because I could think of no other door in England to knock upon. I have no right to ask it. I am an old, turned-off servant, and you do not know me. But I dandled that girl on my knee, and I know she's no more mad than you or I. And I cannot let them take her without having tried everything, even coming to the one man in the north cruel enough to frighten a stepmother. His voice failed entirely. Will you help her, sir? For God's sake, will you help her? The study was silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the sea booming far below the castle walls. Sebastian Thorne rose from his chair. He was a very large man, and when he stood, the firelight threw his scarred shadow up the whole cold length of the study wall. The old steward flinched despite himself. But when the Duke spoke, his deep, ruined voice was quiet, and there was something in it Roland had not expected. Not menace, but a terrible, controlled anger banked like a forge. You did not come to a cruel man, Roland, said the Duke of Grimshaw. You came to the right one. Sit, eat something. You are gray with cold, and tell me the layout of that house. Every door, every stair, every gate, and exactly where in the North Tower they have put her, and how many of the stepmother's London men are within the walls, and when, precisely, the York carriage is expected. He was already moving to the door, calling for his horse to be saddled, and his steward woken, already alight with the one purpose that could burn through his long silence. Because that carriage is not going to find her there. I am going to bring her out of that tower myself. And then Roland, the scarred face turned, and for one moment there was something in it that was almost a smile, the most frightening and the most beautiful thing the old man had ever seen. And then, Sebastian added, I am going to teach Lady Vane exactly what it means to brand an innocent woman mad in my county. Go, we ride before dawn. He did not, in the end, ride in with torches and break down the doors, though every furious instinct in him wanted to. Sebastian had been a soldier. He knew that a frontal charge would only get the girl bundled away all the faster and give the stepmother's bought physicians 100 witnesses to swear the feared Duke of Grimshaw had abducted a madwoman by force. He needed her out of that tower. He needed her sanity established beyond any lie, and he needed the whole rotten scheme dragged into daylight where the law could not look away from it. That required patience, cunning, and a cold head. And Sebastian, for all his fearsome silence, had a very cold head indeed when the cause was worth it. So he learned the house. Old Roland drew him every stair and passage. He learned that the stepmother, Lady Vane, was to be away 3 days hence, to dine and stay the night at a great house 12 miles off, meaning to secure her respectable friend's good opinion before the scandal of the girl's committal broke. He learned that she would take her personal maid and her steward with her, leaving the tower guarded by only 2 of her London men and an old porter. And he learned the one thing that decided everything, that Isolde's late father, Sir Henry, had loved his daughter and had built into the North Tower long ago, in a fond and playful humor when she was small and frightened of storms, a narrow servant's stair hidden behind the paneling. It ran from the tower chamber down to a postern in the garden wall, so the child might slip down to the kitchens for warm milk on wild nights without waking the house. Lady Vane, a Londoner who had lived at Wexcombe for barely 2 years, did not know it existed. Roland, who had carried the small girl up and down it 100 times, knew every step. On the 3rd night, with the stepmother safely 12 miles away at her dinner, the Duke of Grimshaw came for Isolde. Here is the rewritten and polished version of your text in proper English prose, with timestamps, audio artifacts, and speech-to-text glitches removed, while preserving the atmospheric historical romance style. He came on foot through the black winter garden, with old Roland at his side and 2 of his most trusted men behind. They reached the postern in the wall, and Roland's shaking old hands worked a key long thought lost. It turned with a click. Within lay the hidden stair, narrow, cold, and thick with the dust of the years since a child had last run down it. Sebastian ascended in the dark, silent as he had learned to be during the war, one broad hand trailing along the stone wall. His heart, which he had believed long since turned to stone, thudded hard against his ribs in a way he did not understand and did not stop to question. At the top, the stair ended at the back of a paneled wall. Roland whispered which panel to press, and Sebastian set his fingers to the seam and pushed. The panel gave with a small groan of old hinges. Beyond it lay the tower chamber. There, on the far side of the room, past a narrow bed, a cold hearth, and a bowed window through which the winter moon fell in bars of silver, a young woman sprang to her feet in the dark. Her back was against the wall, and a broken shard of pottery was held out in a hand that did not shake. She stood ready, cornered, terrified, and utterly unbroken. "Come no nearer," said Isolde Wexcombe, her voice low, clear, and lacking a single note of madness. "I do not know who you are or how you have come, but I have spent 3 weeks in this room being told I am mad by people who mean to profit by it. I have decided that if I am to be dragged to a madhouse, I will at least mark whoever comes to drag me. So come no nearer. I am not the frightened creature they think me, and I will not go quietly." Sebastian Thorne stood very still in the opening of the broken panel, the moonlight falling across the great scar on his face. He looked at her, at this girl they had branded mad, standing alone, cornered, armed only with a piece of broken crockery, defending herself with the last shred of dignity anyone had left her. Something happened in his chest that had not happened in a very long time, a kind of slow, enormous cracking, like ice breaking up on a frozen river after a long winter. "Miss Wexcombe," he said, keeping his deep, ruined voice as gentle as he knew how, without moving a single muscle toward her. "My name is Sebastian Thorne. I am the Duke of Grimshaw, from over the moor. Your old steward, Roland, came to me. He is here on the stair behind me, and will show himself if it eases you. He could not bear to see you taken, and he could think of no one else with the power to stop it." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I have not come to drag you anywhere. I have come to take you out of this tower tonight, of your own free will, to somewhere safe where no bought physician and no scheming stepmother can touch you. I know you are not mad. I knew it before I set eyes on you, and I know it beyond all doubt now, for a mad woman does not defend herself so well." He held out one great scarred hand, palm up, empty. "But I am a stranger, and a fearsome-looking one, and you are right to trust no one, so I will not come to you. Roland." Dưới đây là phần chuyển thể cuối cùng của toàn bộ câu chuyện sang tiếng Anh, chuẩn phong cách tiểu thuyết cổ điển, mượt mà, và loại bỏ hoàn toàn các lỗi mốc thời gian hay nhận diện giọng nói. The old steward stepped through the panel behind him, into the moonlight, weeping openly. "Miss Isolde," he quavered. "My little Isolde, it's Roland, child. I've brought you help. I've brought you the one man in England who could face them down. Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry it took me so long." Isolde Wexcombe looked from the weeping old servant who had dandled her on his knee to the great, scarred, silent Duke, standing so carefully still in the broken wall, his empty hand held out to her. Slowly, slowly, the shard of pottery was lowered. "Roland," she whispered. "Oh, Roland. They told me you were dead. They told me everyone had, that no one." Her voice broke, and Sebastian watched as 3 weeks of terror, 3 months of slow poisoning, 18 months of mourning her dead father, and the strain of a hostile house cracked open all at once. The brave, cornered girl put her face in her hands and wept, but even as she wept, she did not collapse. She stood and steadied herself against the wall, lifted her wet face, and fixed her eyes on the Duke with a fierce, clear intelligence that put the last nail in the coffin of any lie about her wits. "If I go with you," she said unsteadily, "they will say I fled. They will say a madwoman ran wild into the night, and it will only prove their case. My stepmother is very clever, Your Grace. She has thought of everything. If I simply vanish, she wins." Sebastian felt that slow, enormous cracking in his chest complete itself. She was not only sane, she was cornered, terrified, and half-starved in a cold tower, yet thinking 3 moves ahead of the people destroying her, seeing the trap even as he offered to spring it. In 4 years of war, and 36 years of life. He was not sure he had ever admired a living soul so much. "She has not thought of everything," he said quietly. "She did not think of me. Listen to me, Miss Wexcombe, and tell me if I am wrong, for I begin to think you see these things clearer than I do. I will not spirit you away into the dark to be called a runaway. I will take you tonight to the one place in this county her lies cannot follow you. To Grimshaw, under my protection and my roof, with my own household, and a respectable widowed cousin of mine already sent for to lend you every propriety. And there you will be examined not by her bought men, but by 3 honest physicians of my choosing, by the magistrate, and by any respectable soul in the county who cares to come speak with you and satisfy themselves of what I already know. We will not run from her lie. We will drag it into the daylight and let the whole county look at it, and you will stand there sane and clear-eyed in front of all of them. It is your stepmother, not you, who will have to answer for what has been done in this house." He kept his hand held out, empty, patient. "But it must be your choice, and freely made. I will not so much as touch your sleeve without your leave. Will you come with me, Isolde Wexcombe? Will you let a fearsome stranger and a weeping old man carry you out of this tower and give you back your name?" For a long moment, Isolde looked at the great scarred duke's empty, outstretched hand. Then she crossed the moonlit room, set the broken shard of pottery down upon the little table, and laid her cold, thin hand in his. "Yes," she said, "take me out of here. And then, your grace." There in the dark, half-starved and 3 weeks a prisoner, she lifted her chin, and there was fire in it. "Then help me take back what is mine." Sebastian Thorne closed his great hand very gently around her small one, as though it were made of glass, and something in his stone heart that had been silent since a foreign war 18 years before began quietly to beat again. The first days at Grimshaw were harder than either of them expected, and it was in that hardness that Sebastian came to know her, and she him. For 3 weeks, Isolde had held herself together by sheer will inside that tower, and now that she was safe, the strain of it came due all at once. She slept badly. She woke in the black hours convinced she was still behind the barred window and had to be talked back to reality by Mrs. Hartree, who slept in the adjoining room for exactly that purpose. She startled at the turn of a key in any lock, and for a long while could not bear to have a door shut fully upon her.
They have
There
locked
were
her in the
moments,
North Tower,
Sebastian
Your Majesty,
saw them,
and they
wrung
intend to
something
commit her
deep
to the
inside
asylum
him
before the
when
end
the
of this
long,
month.
patient cruelty of her stepmother's work showed its deepest mark. Moments when Isolde would stop, in the middle of a sentence, turn pale, and ask in a small, frightened voice, utterly unlike her clear, brave tone, I am speaking sense, am I not? You would tell me if I were not." For that was the deepest poison of all. Not the locked door, but 3 weeks of being told patiently, reasonably, by people wearing masks of concern, that her own mind could not be trusted. Sebastian, who understood better than most what it was to have the war inside you go on long after the war outside was done, did the only thing he knew how to do. He told her the truth every time, plainly, without ever making her feel like a burden. "You are speaking perfect sense," he would say, quiet and certain. "You always are. You may ask me 100 times a day, and 100 times a day I will tell you the same, until the part of you that learned to doubt has learned to stop. There is no hurry, Isolde. We have all the time there is." He rearranged his whole cold, ordered household around her healing without ever making it seem an effort. He gave orders quietly so she would not feel watched. No door in the castle was ever to be locked while she was under his roof. Grimshaw, the fortress that had stood locked and guarded above its cliff for centuries, kept every door open all that winter for her. He learned which corridors were too dim and had them lit. He found that she steadied fastest outdoors, in the open where no wall could close in on her, and so he walked with her for hours along the wild cliff paths in the biting wind, saying little, letting the great sky and the endless sea do their slow work of teaching her body it was free. On those walks, gradually, she began to talk. She told him about her father, the fond, absent-minded, book-loving Sir Henry, who had built a secret stair for a frightened child and left an estate to a beloved daughter without once imagining the wolf he had married. She told him about the slow horror of the 18 months since, watching loyal old faces disappear one by one, feeling the walls of whispers close in, and the particular loneliness of being disbelieved by everyone who mattered while wearing the face of a well-cared-for stepdaughter to the world. She told him, one gray afternoon on the cliff with the gulls crying below, the thing she had told no one, that there had come a night in the tower, about the second week, when she had stood at the barred window, looking down at the courtyard stones far below, thinking with terrible calm that a fall would at least be an escape they could not spin into more proof of her madness. She had stepped back from the window and made herself a promise instead, that she would not give her stepmother the satisfaction, that she would live, if only to be a reproach, and had held to that promise by her fingernails ever since. Sebastian stopped walking when she said it. He stood very still on the cliff path, the wind whipping his greatcoat, and for a moment the banked forge of his anger flared so hot he could not speak. Then he mastered it, because she did not need his rage. She needed his steadiness. "I am glad you made that promise," he said, low and rough. "And I am glad more than I have words for that you kept it. Do you know what I thought, Isolde, when I came through that panel and saw you standing there with a broken pot held out, ready to fight a stranger twice your size? I thought I had never in my life, in 4 years of war among brave men, seen courage to touch it. They did everything a human soul can do to break you, patiently, for months, and they did not break you. Not the locked door, not the whispers, not even your own doubt. You are the least mad and the least breakable person I have ever encountered, and I have known some hard men." He turned to face her fully. "You will heal from this. I promise you that. The startling at locks, the waking in the night, the asking, it will fade. Not because you are weak and it must be endured, but because you are strong and it will lose. I have watched my own war go quiet over the years. Yours will too, and you will not do it alone. Whatever else comes of all this, you will never be alone in it again, that I can promise you. Whatever else I cannot." Isolde looked at him for a long moment, the wind whipping her dark hair across her face. "You keep saying, 'whatever else,'" she observed, with a flicker of the dry, clear wit that was returning to her day by day. "As though there were some line you have set yourself that you will not cross. As though you have decided, all on your own, exactly how much of your care I am permitted to notice." Sebastian looked away, out to sea, the scar standing pale against his flushed jaw. "You are a young woman I pulled out of a tower," he said with difficulty. "You are dependent at present on my protection. You are healing from a great cruelty. It would be the act of a scoundrel, a worse scoundrel than the county already thinks me, to let you imagine at such a time that my care for you was anything other than a man's plain duty to a wronged soul. When you are whole again, and home, and free, and want for nothing, you will see me clearly. You will see that I am a scarred, silent recluse, 12 years your elder, whom children are frightened of in the market, and you will be glad I never presumed. So yes, there is a line, and I will not cross it. Do not ask me to." Isolde was quiet. Then she did a thing that stopped his heart. She reached out in the wind and laid her gloved hand over his, where it gripped the cold stone of the cliff wall, gently, the way he had held his empty hand out to her in the tower, asking nothing, only there. "I will not ask you to cross it today," she said softly. "You are right that I am still healing, and right that a good man waits. I have learned this winter exactly how rare a good man is, and I will not have you be less than one, even for my sake." Her hand tightened on his. "But you are wrong about the rest, Sebastian Thorn. You are wrong that I will see you clearly, and be glad you never presumed, because I already see you clearly. Clearer, I think, than you see yourself. The scar, the silence, the 12 years, and the frightened children in the market are not obstacles I am generously overlooking. They are simply you, the you that came for me in the dark, and there is nothing in the whole of it I would change." She released his hand and stepped back, composed, giving him the space he had asked for. "So keep your line for now. Heal me, and give me back my name. I am content to wait, but do not." And here, the fire returned to her clear eyes. "Do not make the mistake of thinking the waiting is because I have not yet decided. I decided in the tower, I am only waiting for you to be brave enough to be told." She turned and walked on ahead of him along the cliff, upright in the wind. Sebastian Thorne stood rooted to the path and watched her go, feeling the last defenses of 18 silent years give way beneath him, like a cliff edge in a storm, and found, to his very great astonishment, that he was not afraid of the fall at all. He had brought her to Grimshaw before dawn, wrapped in his own greatcoat against the killing cold. His household, who feared him and loved him in equal measure, the way people do a hard master who has never once been unjust, took the half-frozen young woman in, warmed her, and fed her. His widowed cousin, Mrs. Hartree, installed herself as chaperone and duenna, becoming a fierce partisan within a day. Then, the feared Duke of Grimshaw set about methodically, and without mercy, the destruction of Lady Vane's lie. He did not go to war with torches. He went to war with witnesses. He sent for the 3 most respected physicians in the North, men whose names no bought scheme could touch. He did not tell them what he wanted them to find. He simply asked them to spend as many hours as they required in conversation with Miss Isolde Wexcombe, and to tell him honestly whether they saw in her any particle of unsound mind. They spent 2 days with her. Isolde, who had feared she would be nervous under their eyes, found instead that she was steady, because for the first time in 18 months, she was among people who wished her well. The physicians talked with her of her father, of the estate, of books, figures, and the management of land, and came away shaking their heads in slow anger. Each wrote out, signed, and sealed a plain statement that Miss Isolde Wexcombe was as sane as any woman in England, that she showed a mind unusually clear and capable, and that in their considered professional judgment, the earlier certificate of insanity was either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud. Sebastian took those 3 sealed papers, along with the sworn testimony of old Roland and the other dismissed servants he had gathered, and laid the whole of it before the county magistrate. The magistrate happened to be a fair man who had been made deeply uneasy by the Wexcombe business, but had lacked the standing to challenge a matter closed by 2 physicians' seals. With the Duke of Grimshaw behind it, 3 unimpeachable physicians against 2 bought ones, and a chorus of loyal old servants, the magistrate found he could act after all. An inquiry was ordered. The 2 physicians who had signed the false certificate, faced with ruin and perjury laws, cracked within the hour and named Lady Vane as the author of the scheme and the payer of their fee. The whole rotten edifice of the stepmother's cruelty, which had stood so long only because no one with power had troubled to push at it, fell in a single week. Lady Vane did not go quietly. She raged. She wept. She called the Duke of Grimshaw a savage who had abducted her stepdaughter and coerced physicians. For a day or 2, her London polish and poisonous tongue nearly turned the tide, for the county was half inclined to believe the worst of the feared Duke, as it always had been. But then Isolde Wexcombe herself walked into the magistrate's inquiry, upright, clear-eyed, and dressed with quiet dignity. She stood before the assembled respectable men of the county, whom her stepmother had so carefully cultivated, and spoke. She did not weep, she did not rail. She simply told the plain truth in a low, clear voice, with the same fierce intelligence that had thought 3 moves ahead in the tower, how her father had loved her and left her his estate, how her stepmother had turned off every servant who could speak for her, how the whispers had begun and grown, how she had been locked in the north tower of her own house and told day after day that she was mad, until she had begun in the loneliness and terror to half-doubt her own mind. "For that," she said, her voice unwavering, "is the cruelest part of what was done to me, gentlemen. Not the locked door, but the patient, deliberate attempt to make me disbelieve my own reason. I stand before you to tell you that it did not succeed. I know exactly who I am, exactly what was done to me, and exactly why. I ask only that you look at me, listen to me, and judge for yourselves whether you are looking at a madwoman or at a woman who was very nearly robbed of her name, her fortune, and her freedom by someone who counted on no one caring enough to look. They looked, they listened, and there was not a man in that room when she finished who could pretend to believe the lie any longer. It was over quickly after that. Lady Vane, faced with the collapse of her scheme, the perjury of her physicians, and the ruin of her good name in the county she had worked so hard to charm, fled south to London before the law could close on her fully. Isolde, who might have pursued her to prison, chose instead to let her go. "I want my life back," she said, "not her destruction. Let her carry what she has done. That is punishment enough." The Wexcombe estate was restored to Isolde Wexcombe whole, and hers, her father's will upheld, her sanity affirmed by seal and inquiry, her name given back to her clean. Through all of it, at every step, the feared Duke of Grimshaw had been at her side. He had told himself at the start that it was only the old cause, the strong grinding the weak, the thing he could never stand by and watch. But somewhere in those weeks, sitting up late with her over estate papers, watching her clear mind unravel her stepmother's frauds faster than his lawyers could, listening to her laugh cautiously at first, then freely as the terror slowly loosened its grip, he understood that it had stopped being about the cause a long while ago. He had spent 18 years in a silence he could not break, believing his heart had died in a foreign war. It had not died. It had only been waiting all that long, cold time for someone worth breaking the silence for. On the evening the estate was formally restored to her, Isolde found him alone on the sea-battered walls of Grimshaw, looking out at the winter water. She came and stood beside him, and for a while neither spoke. "I am to go home tomorrow," she said at last. "To Wexcombe. It is mine again, thanks to you. I have a whole life to take back up, an estate to run, servants to bring home, a house to make my own." She was quiet a moment. "And I find I do not want to go." Sebastian's scarred hands tightened on the cold stone. He did not turn. "You must go," he said low. "It is your home. It is yours. I did not fight to give you back your freedom, only to keep you from it." "No," Isolde agreed, stepping closer until her shoulder nearly brushed his arm, looking out at the same dark sea. "You are not that kind of man. That is rather the difficulty, Sebastian." She had never used his name before either. He felt it go through him, like the first crack of the ice in the tower. "You came for me when no one else in England would," she continued. "You carried me out of that tower, and you never once touched my sleeve without my leave. You gathered your witnesses, dragged the lie into the daylight, and gave me back my name, my mind, my whole self, and you asked nothing, nothing at all in return. You would let me walk home to Wexcombe tomorrow and never speak of what is plainly between us, because you are too much a gentleman, and too little a believer in your own worth, to ask a woman you rescued to imagine she owes you her heart." She turned to face him and made him turn to face her, looking up at the great, scarred, silent Duke, whom the whole county feared, and whom she had come in a handful of weeks to see clearer than anyone alive. "So I shall have to be the one to say it, since you never will. I am not offering you my hand out of gratitude, Sebastian Thorn. Gratitude I could repay in a letter. I am telling you that in the whole of my life, the only place I have ever felt truly safe, truly seen, truly myself, is at your side. That a man they call a monster took more care of my dignity in 3 weeks than the world took in 24 years. And I do not want to go home to Wexcombe alone, because I have found, to my very great surprise, that home is not a house at all. It is you." Her voice trembled just once, then steadied. "So I am asking you, will you have me? Not the rescued girl, the whole woman, with her estate, her stubbornness, her hard-won sanity, and her heart, which appears to have become entirely yours somewhere on a hidden stair in the dark. Will you have me, Sebastian?" For a long moment, the feared Duke of Grimshaw could not speak at all. The sea boomed below the walls. The winter wind took her dark hair and his greatcoat, and the last of the ice that 18 silent years had built around his heart broke up entirely and went out to sea. "Isolde," he said at last, his deep, ruined voice cracking clean through on her name. "I have been silent for 18 years because I thought there was nothing left in me worth speaking for. I came for you, meaning only to right a wrong, go back to my tower and my silence, and be alone, because being alone was the most I dared to want. And instead, I found—" He lifted one great, scarred hand slowly, and with infinite care touched her cold cheek, the first time he had touched her ungiven, and she leaned into it. I found the one soul in the world who looked at the monster and was not afraid, who looked at the wreck the war left and saw a man still standing in it. I have nothing to give you that you have not already given back to yourself. Only this heart, which I believed was stone, and which you have somehow set beating again. It is yours. It has been yours, I think, since you lifted that shard of pottery and told a duke to come no nearer. Yes, Isolde Wexcombe. God knows I am not worthy of it. But yes, 1,000 times yes, I will have you, and I will spend the rest of my life making certain that no one ever again teaches you to doubt your own worth. You are the sanest, bravest, truest soul I have ever known, and I will tell you so every morning of our lives until you are tired of hearing it. I shall never be tired of hearing it from you, said Isolde, laughing and weeping both at once. She rose on her toes there on the wild, sea-battered walls of Grimshaw, and the feared duke bent his scarred head as the wind, the sea, and the winter stars stood as their only witnesses. They were married at Grimshaw in the spring, when the sea had gentled and the moor had greened. Old Roland, restored to his stewardship and weeping harder than anyone, gave the bride away, for she would have no one else. Isolde Wexcombe, who had been branded mad, locked in a tower, and nearly lost to the world, became Duchess of Grimshaw and ran her own Wexcombe estate and half her husband's besides, with a clear head and a firm hand. And the county that had once feared the monster of Grimshaw came in time to understand the truth old Roland had known all along, that behind the scar and the silence had always stood the one man in the north who could not and would not ever stand by while the strong crushed the weak, and that it had taken a woman brave enough to hold out a broken shard of pottery against him to teach him, at last, that he was worth loving. He never went back to the silence. She never let him. And Grimshaw, which had been a cold ruin above a cold sea, became, against every expectation of the county, the warmest house in 3 counties. For there is no warmth in all the world quite like the warmth of 2 people who were once alone and half frozen, and who found in one another the thing worth thawing for.